My name is Rachel Barker. I'm an undergrad student here at Sam Houston State in a master's in public health program. We have a 4-in-1 program. So I'm half like an undergrad, half a grad student here. And I was a part of this smart food consumption study that took place at Sam Houston State University this summer. Um, Sam Houston State University is in Huntsville, Texas, which is about an hour to an hour and a half north of Houston, Texas. And this internship and study mostly took place in Gibbs Ranch, which is Sam Houston's ranch we use for agricultural sciences. And my supervisors were Dr. Chen and Dr. Rahi. So the Smart Food Consumption Study was a summer workshop that focused on educating adolescents about healthy eating, food labels, and budget-friendly shopping. It aimed to build lifelong health habits and promote financial literacy through nutrition education. And in our literacy review, we found there's obviously poor nutrition education, and there's been an increase in screen time and social media exposure, which can lead to unhealthy eating behaviors. So that's what the workshop was kind of focused on. It was offering hands-on experience in meal planning, label reading, and food safety with an emphasis on nutrient-dense and cost-effective meals. And it highlighted the importance of reaching both teens and their families to improve nutrition knowledge at home and creating a lasting behavioral change. So the way we did this study was we conducted over 6 sessions, combining lectures, hands-on activities, and field trips throughout the summer. So I wasn't a part of the recruitment process, but at some point, these teens were recruited through different ways. And then once they were brought to us, the interns just kind of showed up and they were thankfully provided for us. And then we were assigned a week to teach and to lead the activity and field trip. And we attended every week to kind of support our different mentees and all the students. And so on the first week, we talked about basic nutrition and the importance of nutrition. I took them on a Walmart shopping trip, and they got $50 to spend on a week's worth of groceries. And then we analyzed and took data on what they decided to buy with that $50. And then the second week, we talked about My Plate and the thrifty food plan. And we also talked about how to plan meals, how to categorize foods into different categories like vegetables, grains, dairy, fruit, different categories. And we also talked about how to shop with a budget. And the field trip that week was to go to this farm called Sustain Huntsville, which is like this little farm, big garden, and this old professor from our university runs it and donates all the food to the food pantries in town. And so they got to learn a little bit about gardening and how to the production of food, as well as that service of food insecurity. And then the third week, we talked about food safety and food waste and how a low understanding of food safety can result in food waste. So if people don't realize how long they can keep a certain product in the fridge and they toss it prematurely, then they're wasting that food, and how that relationship and understanding of both are really important. And we went to the food pantry on campus. The fourth week, we talked about food insecurity and how socioeconomic placement impacts your nutrition. Then we went to the Sam Houston State University Teaching Kitchen, where the students got to practice 5 quick recipes that were pulled from My Plate. And then on the 5th week, we talked about food budgeting with the thrifty food plan, and we had the parents come and bring their recent grocery bills to see what percentage they were spending their grocery bills on, like each category. So they divided up by like what percent their bill is going towards vegetables, which percent was going to grains, and so on and so forth. And then our last week, we talked about food shopping behaviors using the Dietary Guidelines for Americans and the My Plate plan, and how to reduce food expenses using meal plans, and how to have some easy trade outs. So things like a yogurt that's high in sugar and fat, how to have a low fat and low sugar yogurt, and like easy swaps that are pretty similar in price. And then we finally went back to Walmart on the last week, and they had the same prompt with $50 to go shopping for a week's worth of groceries. And then we compared what groceries they got between those 2 weeks. So this model and method allowed for students to work with their families and have open discussions about nutrition. They were able to gain hands-on experience by going to kitchens, seeing food pantries, going in a garden, and they also got a closer peer-to-peer mentorship. So they were high school and middle schoolers, and we were college students. So I think that was beneficial instead of like someone older trying to kind of communicate and relate to them. We also used Mentimeter throughout the sessions, which allowed for them to be engaged and kind of have different activities that allowed them to talk to their peers and discuss in kind of that game format to really learn the information. And then we also collected a pre and post survey. So before they had any lessons, we gave them a bunch of questions, which we're kind of going to go into in the results section. And then they took the exact same survey on the last day. And so we kind of measured how their understanding and knowledge changed, as well as those grocery baskets. So now let me see if I can zoom in. I don't know if it's going to let me zoom in, but you might have to squint or I'll just tell you the results. So as far as the survey they took before and after, that's where a lot of our results come from. So their fruit intake went from 2 to 2.46. So the question that was asked of them was, how many times a day do you eat fruit? So it went from 2 times a day to an average of 2.46. So obviously that's an increase, with the max amount of being 4 times a day. And then the vegetable intake went from beginning before the workshop at 1.62 to 2.31 times a day, so it increased. We also had whole grain choices increased by 193%. So it went from 1.86 to 5.46 out of 7. So that question was, when you have a choice, how often do you choose whole grains? So they obviously, this result shows us that they learned about the importance of whole grains and how whole grains are more nutritious than a non-whole grain, and showed that they were changing their behavior. And then when asked about if they make healthy choices when eating out, it increased by 185%. So it went from 1.62 to 4.62 out of 7. And then for nutrition label use, that question was, how often do they look at the nutrition label? So a lot of them had never seen a nutrition label until we had a session that went over how to look at that and what those numbers mean. And so it went from 1.57 to 2.77. And then making your own meals or snacks instead of buying them went from 1.57 to 2.77. So all these numbers showing an increase is really good. It shows that our lessons were helpful, and that they were really getting that information and changing their behavior. Another great one is the meal planning. So this is about if they plan their meals before they go shopping. So it went up 92%. And then grocery list use. So if they write everything down, we talked about how if you just go to the grocery store with no list, you might just end up with all these things that you weren't planning on buying, and normally they're not the most healthy options. It's normally those last minute candies and chips. And so we talked about the importance of using a grocery list, and that went up by 65%. And then these charts here show what they bought in their grocery cart. So that green section is miscellaneous on this participant. So as you can see, the miscellaneous section was more than half of the person's cart before we did the workshop, but after the workshop, it was only 10%. You can see that in the first time, they didn't get any vegetables, but on their the post workshop, they did buy some vegetables. They increased their fruits. They added protein. They had no protein the first time they went shopping. So you can see that this is a much more balanced grocery cart compared to the pre-workshop. And then our second participant also had these pretty similar findings. The miscellaneous section was 67% before the workshop, and then after went down to 20%. And just overall is a more balanced cart. And so overall miscellaneous shopping with all the students, there's about 20 of them, went down 43%. So those are things like your chips, your candy, just things that don't really have that much nutritional value in the main group food groups. So that was the biggest change, was that the grocery cart decreased in those miscellaneous food groups. So some things that for the discussion section, this workshop increased the awareness of nutrition and budgeting for these teen participants, as well as their parents. So we did involve those parents because obviously as a teen, they only have so much control over what they buy, cook, and eat at their house. So we thought it was important to involve the parents and get their perspective and make sure that they're getting that knowledge. And then we also help them build practical skills by teaching them meal planning, budget shopping, and using My Plate for guidance. They had real world experiences that they could apply in their everyday life. And then some challenges that we faced was the summer attendance was a little hard to keep track of. So they would often go on vacations and then maybe not come back, or if one of their friends didn't come, they weren't able to come because they needed a ride. So it was a little tricky to get someone there. A lot of participants weren't there every day for each workshop. And then we had a lot of different sessions, as you heard me go over, but their favorite session on the post survey, they got to rank each session, and their favorite session was going over what or the difference between organic and non-organic foods. Some of the personal changes I got from participating in this study was I felt more confident speaking and teaching in front of groups. So I had a day where I taught the lesson, so I was able to go up in front of all the students and practice presenting to them. It also helped me develop patience and flexibility when working with these youth. So obviously on day to day, I don't really interact with people in high school, but that having that relationship build over the 6 weeks and helping them learn and just making sure they were on the right task and kind of being their teacher for 6 weeks really helped me gain some flexibility and patience. I also gained a stronger sense of responsibility and attention to detail and data collection. And I grew more passionate about health information being engaging and accessible. And then some professional changes. As I said, I'm a public health major, so it was great to experience evaluating program effectiveness, and applying tools like My Plate and Thrifty Food Plan, and then enhancing my teamwork, leadership, and communication skills through the collaboration with my other interns. And then I also gained a lot by going through the process of having to make a poster and research report for this project. And then the elements that are applicable to my future career in public health are I have a better understanding of how education and outreach drives behavioral changes in communities. I've experienced translating public health theory and science information into hands-on evidence-based programming. And then I also thought it was valuable to have practice with that health education and directly interacting with the teenagers. So overall, I think it was a very successful workshop. The results speak for themselves. The students were able to gain a lot on behavior change as well as knowledge. So I think it was successful. I'd like to thank Dr. Wolfskill, Dr. Rahi, and Dr. Chen for their help and support throughout this process, and for making this opportunity available. Thank you.